Hello and welcome. My name is Shadow Retro and I'm here today to tell you all about Companion. So Companion 2.0 Part 2 came out with Koumei and the Five Fates. That's the second update in the Companion rework. So there's obviously a lot of new stuff to talk about with Companions, but this video is going to be much more. This video isn't just going to talk about the new stuff that's actually with Companions related to the rework, but also going to talk about Companions much more broadly and specifically, so any kind of player, even new players, will be able to watch this video and know exactly what's going on with Companions. So we'll be going through each Companion, the generic information about Companions, and we'll be talking about what companions are good, when would I use them, and how I would recommend you use them as well, and stuff like that. This video will cover generic companion information that can be applied to all companions. However, we will only be going into detail about the robotic companions. I will then be making another video about the beast companions, hopefully very soon after this one, which will once again recover the same generic detail, as I want anyone to be able to watch either or video without watching the other one and still be able to hear the generic information, and then going into detail about the beast companions, which is what the second video will be about. So let's get into it. So, what are companions? Companions are NPCs that fight alongside you and attack enemies for you. Primarily, they're most useful for giving you all sorts of different utility. Companions are broken up into two different categories, which I've already mentioned: robotics and beasts. This video will be covering robotic companions. A part of these two different categories, they are broken up into different modes. So there are different types of mods that can fit on companions. There are companion mods that will go on every single companion with some exceptions. Robotic mods, which will go on every single robotic companion. And then beast mods that will fit on all beast companions. Beast mods are also then further broken down into two different categories, but we'll cover that in more detail in the beast companion video. Different companions have their own abilities, which give them their own different types of usefulness and different types of utility that can basically decide whether another companion is good or bad. However, there are mods that will fit on all types of companions that will give them utility across the board. Such mods are Fetch and Vacuum. Fetch is the beast version, Vacuum is the robotics version, which will give you I believe it's 13.5 meter loot pickup, which I hope I don't need to explain why that's so good. Another example would be Synth Deconstruct, which will make it so enemies will have an increased chance to drop health orbs on death if they are tagged by the companion, and the Synth mod set will also have the mod set effect of increasing your weapon's reload while holstered by 5%, and it increases by 5% for each one. So if you used more Synth mods, it would go up by 5% up to 20%, as there are 4 synth mods, but I only really recommend using Synth Deconstruct. And then Animal Instinct / Primed Animal Instinct, that will give you Enemy Raider and Loot Raider. Enemy Raider isn't really needed as important anymore, and neither is Primed Animal Instincts, as we now have default Enemy Raider, which we've had for a while now. We didn't originally. However, the increased Enemy Raider will stack on the default Enemy Raider you have, which can be very nice, and Loot Raider can also be nice for different setups. Companions have their own health, shields, and armor, just like a Warframe, and can die. When they do die, they have a 60-second respawn timer, and their respawn timer can be reduced by all sorts of different mods that will go on them. Most companions will go into a bleed down state when they die. By this, I mean they will be on the ground, and players, not just you, but any other person in your team, will be able to go up to the companion and manually revive them if you wish. However, if you choose to not manually revive them, they will automatically revive once their respawn timer is finished. Companions also take a unique type of mod called Precept mods. Precept mods are essentially the companion's abilities, and there is an order of priority when dealing with Precept mods for companions, just like the order of priority when dealing with modded elements and how they mix together for weapons. What I mean by this is each time the companion goes to activate one of its presets, it will go in order of the mods and basically decide which precept it will use. It will use whatever precept comes first in the order that is currently off cooldown that can be activated. The order is as follows: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it goes left to right on the top row first, left to right on the bottom row second. If it's not clear what I mean, basically if you have, let's say I have a precept mod like Guardian, and then I have a precept mod like Shield Charger in that order. When the companion goes to activate its precepts, it will first check the first mod slot. It will see Guardian. Guardian will only activate when our shields are fully depleted, so we can't activate Guardian right now. Then it will go to the second mod slot. It will see Shield Charger. Shield Recharger isn't on cooldown right now, so it will then activate Shield Recharger. And it doesn't matter if the precept mod is here or there. If there's other mods here that aren't precept mods, like just some generic random mods that can fit on the companion, like let's say Enhanced Vitality, it will ignore that because it's not an ability, so it doesn't really affect it. But it will go in the order until it finds the next preset mod, check to see if it can activate it, and then it will activate it. If it can activate it, it won't activate any of the other preset mods after it. So, as an example, if you had Assault mode in the front, when it goes to activate a preset mod, it will check if Assault, what the first preset mod is. It is Assault mode, which is always activated and cannot be unactivated, and it won't go any further. So you always have to have Assault mode and also Vacuum, which is another one that works the same as Assault mode in your last 2 slots, as these mods will always be activated, even if other preset mods are currently being checked. And if they are in front of a preset mod, like Assault mode being in front of Shield Charger, it will stop that preset from being activated. So you want them at the end of the mod order. Additionally, you'll notice that companions do have 10 mod slots, unlike the usual 8. Companions do give mastery. They give 200 per level, and they go to level 30, so they give 6,000 a total, just like Warframes. And companions also come with weapons. We'll talk about beast weapons more specifically when we go into the beast weapon build, but robotic companions will use weapons that are specific to them, but will use normal weapon mods, the same mods that our normal weapons use, will give us 100 MR per level, so 3,000 total, and do take Auric and Catalyst in order to double their mod capacity. And just like how Sentients will, just like how companions, all companions, not just robotic companions, will take reactors in order to double their mod capacity. So, starting with Sentinels. Sentinels are basically the first companion you're going to be introduced in the game, as upon completing the Venus Junction, you will be given the Taxon blueprint, which is a specific sentient. Sentients will use all robotic mods and most companion mods. They cannot use the companion mods of Linked Redirect, Linked Vitality, Linked Fiber, Loyal Companion, Medi Pet Kit, or Pack Leader / Primed Pack Leader. But besides those mods, they will be able to use all other companion mods. Unlike all other companions, Sentinels will not run around side you and be able to run after different enemies and attack them. Instead, they will float above your head and attack enemies from there. They will not also they will also not have a bleed out timer like other companions. They will still go into a respawn timer where they will become demobilized above your head and they won't attack any enemies while in this state. But unlike other companions, you can't go and then revive them manually. You have to wait for them to automatically revive when their respawn timer ends. Since Sentinels, and actually all robotics, can make use of robotic mods, that gives them some additional utility that beast companions cannot use, such as the mods Guardian, which will completely restore your shield whenever they fully deplete, as long as it's off cooldown. Shield Recharger, which will increase your max shields, which also increases your shield gate, assuming you're not already at the max shield gate, and also increases the shield regeneration rate by 60% for 10 seconds, as long as it's not off cooldown. And Manifold Bond, which is very useful as it will do 2 things. First of all, killing an enemy inflicted with 3 or more status effects will lower the cooldown of all preset mods on the companion by 3 seconds. Additionally, it will also prime enemies within the area each time the companion activates one of its preset mods with all of the status effects that the companion's weapon does. So, very useful mods that can only be put on robotics. All Sentinels will come with a specific weapon in addition to the Sentinel itself when you build them. This means that Sentinels will actually technically come with 9,000 MR, as they will give you 6,000, and the weapon they come with will be 3,000. So they're very good for leveling MR. Although they come with a specific weapon, Sentinels can actually use any Sentinel weapon. They do not have to use the weapon that they come with. There is also an additional 4 sentient weapons that you get from Legs in Fortuna with Solaris United standing. They do not come with any sentient. I keep calling them sentients. I just want to make it clear they are called Sentinels. I'm reading Sentinels in my script, but for some reason I keep actually saying sentients. For now on, hopefully I'll call them Sentinels. So they are Sentinels. Do not mistake them for the enemy faction that is sentients. I'm sorry, that's my bad. Sentinels are also the only prime companions in the game which have prime variants. Obviously, not all of them have prime variants, but some of them do. So how do you actually get Sentinels? Well, most Sentinels, with the exception of only 4 of them, will be just simply purchased from the market. You buy their blueprint from the market, to be clear, and then you'll be able to go into the foundry, farm up the resources needed to build them, and then build them. And upon building them, you will get the Sentinel itself and also their weapon. The 4 exceptions to this, however, are the Helios, which you get the blueprint from the Energy Lab in the dojo, the Djinn, which you get from the Bio Lab in the dojo, Oxylus, which you actually buy from the business in Fortuna for Solaris United Standing, and Nautilus, which you get its blueprints as well as its components from Points of Interest and Defense Missions, Rotations B and C on the Neptune Proxima. And the way you get Prime Sentinels is the same as you'd get any other Prime item from Relics. Additionally, I want to point out this mod right here, which is Assault Mode. It will allow the Sentinel to actually attack any enemy. It will attack the first enemy it sees within 30 meters. Sentinels, a lot of the Sentinels have variations of this mode that are specific to them, but Assault Mode is one that can fit on all Sentinels and is most of the time better than the specific version of it for the different companions. Assault Mode is needed for the Sentinel to actually attack enemies. If Assault Mode is not on a Sentinel or a counterpart of Assault Mode, the Sentinel will not attack enemies with the weapon. Speaking of weapons, let's first talk about Sentinel weapons and which ones I recommend you using. While this update did attempt to make a lot more of the Sentinel weapons a bit more usable, which it kind of did, there are still really only 2 Sentinel weapons that you would use on 90% of your Sentinel builds because they're just far better than every other Sentinel weapon in the game. First up, we have the Taxon. The Taxon is a chaining beam weapon that has pretty good status chance, but pretty bad crit chance and crit damage multipliers, and very low base damage, so it is very bad for DPS. However, it is amazing for priming enemies because it will chain between enemies. My build I have here is, and I use this build on all of my Sentients that use priming, which is basically pretty much all of my Sentinels that don't use DPS, which is the majority of them. And the build here is very simple. We simply have our elements, which is viral, and the weapon does base electric, so that's our third element there, and of course radiation. Then we have more status chance, reload speed, multi-shot, and we have fire rate and punch through with shred. If you have prime shred, obviously use prime shred. I don't. Almost. I'm getting close. It's the last one of the login rewards I don't have. Very close now though. And in this empty mod slot, I haven't formatted it yet, but in the empty mod slot, I would recommend putting on Vigilant armaments for some additional multi-shot. And this is Taxon in effect here. You can see that it chains between enemies and that it is very good at priming enemies with different status effects. The second one we have is the Verglass, or the Verglass Prime preferably. Obviously, you get the primed variants from the primed Sentinel. The Verglass is the best companion weapon when it comes to DPS. It also has pretty bad... The Verglass Prime does have a lot better crit chance and crit damage multipliers than the normal one. The Verglass itself has pretty... not the greatest crit chance multiplier, but it has a very high status chance, and it is a beam weapon just like Taxon, though it doesn't chain between enemies, and it does a lot of damage, especially when paired with viral heat setups like this one. This build is very simple. We simply just have base damage, faction damage, fire rate, reload speed, viral heat, and then more heat. It does have base cold, so you do want to add quite a bit of heat in order to actually make the status the proc priority, right? So it does more heat than viral, which is also why we're using the unranked cold and toxic mods. Here you can see Verglass in effect. Obviously, it's not going to do too much damage to heavy gunners as they're tough enemies, but you can see as it applies more and more heat procs, it actually starts to do quite a lot of damage against this enemy. And most enemies aren't nearly as tanky as heavy gunners, so you can imagine how quickly it would blow past a lot of enemies. Okay, so starting off with the Taxon. The Taxon is the first companion you get in the game. As I said, you get its blueprint from completing the Venus junction, but you can also buy additional blueprints simply from the market. The Taxon is very good because it has the unique precept called Molecular Conversion, which will attack enemies with a strong beam, which will convert the damage it does into shields and overshields. This, paired with Shield Charger and also Guardian, makes it extremely good for shield tank builds, as it gives you a lot of shield regen, which can give you a lot of extra tankiness to your setups. So I recommend using... So this is the best companion in the game when it comes to shield tank setups, and I recommend using it for all shield tank setups, unless you need a companion with a different type of utility to make the build work. So on the setup, we do have Guardian, Shield Charger, and also Molecular Convulsion, just as I said. I do make sure they are in this order. This is because when the companion goes to decide to activate its precepts, it will first track Guardian, which we want it to first track Guardian. It will notice which way if our shields do fully deplete, nothing will be in the way of Guardian, and Guardian will be able to act freely. But normally our shields won't be fully depleted, in which case Guardian won't activate. It will check Shield Charger, giving us that extra shield, max shields, and shield regeneration, obviously giving us a lot more tankiness to our shield ability. And then if our Shield Charger is on cooldown, it will check Molecular Convulsion, which does a shorter cooldown than Shield Charger, which will then increase our shields even more. We obviously have Manifold Bond to lower the duration of the cooldown of all these precepts, and we are pairing this with the Taxon for priming enemies, which will also prime enemies with 3 different status effects, being radiation, electric, and viral, which will trigger Manifold Bond. Momentumous Bond will give the companion an additional element whenever we kill an Xmas unit, but it will also lower the recovery timer by 18 seconds whenever we kill an Xmas unit, so it's primarily used for that reason. Since the Construct is also used, which is very good with Tazako, as Tazako will allow the companion to tag a lot of enemies, which will each have their health orb drop chance increased, and increased health orbs also means increased energy if you're using Equilibrium or Purple Shards. Calculator Redirection and Enhanced Vitality are simply for the survivability of the companion, and Assault Mode and Vacuum are obviously a must-have to make this build work. After Taxon, we have Helios, which I said is gotten from the Energy Lab. So Helios has the ability to scan enemies into the Codex using your Codex scanners or Sentient scanners in your gear wheel, so it will use up one each time. It can also reveal weak spots on enemies that are already fully scanned. Honestly, I don't think scanning it... This companion is actually often recommended to new players quite often, which is why I had it second on the list. But I don't think it is important to actually scan enemies into the Codex, because I don't see the point of it, because the wiki exists, and the wiki honestly just gives you more information anyway, and you don't have to do the hassle of scanning enemies. And also, the weak spot also isn't good enough to really justify the use of this companion. It does have its niche utility, so if you wanted to scan enemies, then I would definitely recommend the Helios to do that for. I do not have a build to showcase for it because I don't use it personally, but if you did want to make a build with it, I would simply just use its preset mods, Guardian, obviously Assault Mode, and Vacuum with generic survivability mods on it, and probably Manifold Bond as well, plus the Tazakor. Sorry, I forgot to mention that the Taxon comes with the Sentinel mod Artrax, and Helios does have a Prime variation, and it comes with Deconstructor or Deconstructor Prime, if you're talking about the Prime variation. Djinn comes with the Sentinel weapon Stina, and it is the only truly useless Sentinel. The Sentinels are actually all pretty good, with they given at least some form of niche utility, even if it's not a very good utility, where Djinn is actually completely useless. It does have a preset mod that will draw enemies in. It won't group them, but it will kind of lure their fire and then explode, dealing a tiny bit of corrosive damage over 5 seconds. So it's a DOT over time for 5 seconds, while also applying corrosive procs per second. So it does have that. But its other preset mod simply just reduces its respawn timer by 6 seconds each time it picks up an energy orb drop, and there are tons of mods that will reduce the respawn timer, which can be put on any companion, so it's really not that great, and I don't really see a use or utility for it anywhere, because even the explosion isn't that good, as there are definitely companions that do a lot more damage. Simply just using Verglass will make a companion do more damage than it. Oxylus comes with the Sentinel mod Moltron, and as I said, you buy it from the business in Fortuna. Oxylus is basically your companion that's going to help you do side objectives in the open worlds. It's one of its precepts will reveal fish and also hotspots while fishing. It will make them highlighted, so that can be very useful while you're fishing. Another one of them will also similarly reveal mining spots and also resource containers, and it can even break into resource containers. And then its last precept mod will scan plants. I don't really think this companion is that useful anyway, because you can honestly avoid doing all of those activities by doing Thumpers, Exploder Orb, or Rockroom Obelisks, depending on which open world you're talking about. But if you are having trouble fishing or mining, and you did want to do fishing or mining compared to one of the options I just mentioned, then yes, the Oxylus can be useful for you, so there is that utility. Once again, I don't have a build for it because I don't use it. I don't think it is useful, so I will... But if you did want a generic build for it, you honestly don't really need that much, because you're probably not going to be taking this into Steel Path because there's no use for it, so just chuck on its normal preset mods and Vacuum, and you'll be right. Next is Carrier. So Carrier does have a use, but its use is a bit more on the niche side. I'll explain further as I talk about what its precepts do. It does have a Prime variation, and it comes with the weapon Sweeper, or Sweeper Prime for the Prime variation. Its preset mods allow it to open loot crates, which is nice, I suppose, but there are obviously much better ways to do that. And then you can also increase, because it's not like locked loot crates, it's just the same loot crates that you would open with any of your weapons or abilities, for example. Its other preset mode will increase the ammo capacity of your weapons while also giving you ammo mutation. This is a nice little bit of utility. Like 100%, you can definitely see the value with this utility, but the issue is there are so many other companions that just give so much better utility than this one that I can't see a justification for using Carrier over any other companion. So I wouldn't recommend using it, and for this reason, I also don't have a build for it. But if you did want to build, simply put on its preset mods, Guardian, probably Shield Recharger as well if you're shield tanking, otherwise don't do that. Vacuum and Assault Mode, obviously, generic survivability mods, Manifold Bond as well, and you'd be good. Next, we have Shade. So Shade also has a primed and a Prisma version of it. And the Prisma version is obviously gotten from Barrow. The Shade comes with the Burst Laser, the Prisma Burst Laser, or the Burst Laser Prime. It has the preset mode Ghost, which will make a player go invisible for an infinite amount of time, or whenever there are enemies within 24 meters of them. The second you use your weapons, however, it will break the invisibility. Abilities will not break the invisibility, however. If you find yourself in a situation where there are no longer any enemies within 24 meters of you, the invisibility will end. However, there is now a new 3-second delay before that happens. And within those 3 seconds, if you manage to get within range of an enemy to keep the ability going, it will not turn off. Its other preset mode is Ambush, which will give you an additive 240% weapon buff for 3 seconds whenever you leave invisibility. This is definitely fun to play around with and could be cool, but the additive buff is really not that good and is also inconsistent because of the way Ghost and Ambush work. And there is a Beast Companion that actually has a preset mod that does the exact same thing as Ghost, but it can make use of other mods that Robotic Companions cannot use, which makes it better than Shade in every single way. So I also wouldn't recommend using Shade, as I would simply just recommend using that Beast Companion instead. Its name is the Horus Kupuro if you're interested. Wyrm, once again, has a Prime, and it comes with the Laser Rifle, or the Prime Laser Rifle. Wyrm's preset mods will knock down enemies, which is useless, but its other preset mod will negate one status effect every 5 seconds, and the cooldown on this is affected by Manifold Bond. Up until this update, it was not, but with this update, it is now affected by Manifold Bond. This can basically give you status immunity, meaning it's very good. I would argue Wyrm is the best companion for shield gate builds, because while health tank and shield tanks don't really care that much about status effects can really mess with your survivability if you're shield gating. So Wyrm's status immunity can be very, very good when it comes to shield gating. You can also simply chuck on things like Guardian to further improve that. For the Wyrm build, we do have Guardian, as we are using this for shield gating, so whenever our shield depletes, it will give us that 100% shield restored. Momentum Bond, again, for the recovery timer being reduced by 18 seconds whenever we kill an Xmas. Manifold Bond, obviously, to lower the duration on the cooldown on Guardian. Synth Deconstruct, to pair with our weapon, which is obviously Tazakor, for that extra health orbs, which equals energy with Equilibrium or Purple Shards. Negate, which is the Wyrm's effect that gives us status immunity. Assault Mode, obviously, as a must-have. Basic survivability for health and shields, and Vacuum again as a must-have. In this empty slot, I recommend using Regen or Primed Regen if you have it, which will further reduce the companion's respawn timer as a base. I obviously can't fit it on. I need to form this companion again. Next up, we have the Diriga, which comes with Volclock. Diriga has the precept mod called Arc Coil. Its other precept mods aren't really important and aren't worth mentioning, but Arc Coil will zap 7 enemies within 10 meters with very little damage and very little status chance. The actual effect itself is not important. What is important is it has a 5-second cooldown, and unlike Negate, which also has a 5-second cooldown, it doesn't need to be triggered by something. So Negate only gets triggered whenever you take a status effect. Arc Coil can constantly be activated. This means with only a 5-second cooldown, you only need to kill 2 enemies with 3 or more status effects to fully reset the cooldown on Arc Coil with Manifold Bond, allowing Arc Coil to be spammed. And each time Arc Coil activates, Manifold Bond will prime enemies with the status effects of your weapons. Spamming, basically priming enemies constantly, right? Now, you might wonder why you would use Diriga with this setup versus any other companion with Tazakor, because Tazakor can just prime enemies just as well, if not better, than Diriga. And it's because Diriga doesn't actually care about the mods on the weapon, where Tazakor does, because the weapon isn't technically priming enemies, but Diriga itself is. This means you don't need to have assault mode on Diriga, and you also can use your weapon as more of a stat stick for your weapons. Because of this, we actually use 2 weapons that aren't either Tazakor or Verglass for Diriga. The first one is Laser Rifle. Laser Rifle is used because it is one of the 3 Sentinel weapons that take rifle mods that can have above 50% crit chance for Tenacious Bond, which will give our weapons a 1.2 final crit damage multiplier on whenever our companion's weapon has above 50% crit chance. The other ones, however, unlike Laser Rifle, the other 2 ones will only have 1 base element, while Laser Rifle has all 3 IPS. This allows us to mod for an additional 3 elements using mods to get Radiation, Viral, and Electric, giving us a total of 6 different status effects for Manifold Bond priming, making it much better than the other 2. Laser Rifle Prime also gets above 50% crit chance, of course, so you can use Laser Rifle Prime if you have it. I don't, which is why I'm not. Additionally, in the 3 extra mod slots, you can mod on the 3 Vigilant mods. I can't because of mod capacity. Well, I can mod on 1, but I can't mod the other 3. The Vigilant mods will then can then be used to further buff your crit chance for your primary weapons. So laser rifle will be the variant that you use with Diriga whenever you want to use it as a stat stick for the extra crit damage. Additional priming that either Tactical can't do, as this one will prime 6 status effects, Tactical only does 3, and also for the extra crit chance buff for your primaries. The Burst Laser Prime, or the Prisma Burst Laser, is the other companion or the Sentinel weapon that we use for Diriga, as it also can reach above 50% crit chance, both the Prisma and the Prime version. However, the regular version can't, unfortunately. So you can get the above 50% crit chance for Tenacious Bond priming, and the laser rifle, all 3 variants, are also the only pistol Sentinel weapons in the game, meaning they're the only ones that can have Auger Pact and Auger Seeker. This is important for any shield gate setup that is using a secondary as your main DPS source, as you can't mod for Auger Pact and Seeker on your main DPS source if it's a secondary, meaning we can use this one instead for the extra survivability. If you aren't using your secondary for DPS, then you may as well just put these 2 mods on your normal secondaries, in which case this doesn't matter. Besides that though, this build is basically the exact same, as it uses Creeping Bullseye for the extra crit chance, and then it has the Radiation, Viral, and Electric paired with the IPS, which gives us the 6 status effects for Diriga's priming. Now onto the actual Diriga build itself. Obviously we have Arc Coil right up front because we want that activating constantly. We do have Manifold Bond to reduce its cooldown, and we do have Guardian for the extra survivability. Basic survivability for the companion with the must-have Vacuum, and obviously Regen to reduce its cooldown. Its respawn timer cooldown. And then we have Synth Deconstruct, of course, for the extra health orb generation, Tenacious Bond for that extra crit damage, and Momentum Spawn for the extra survivability. Diriga can also be used very well with this mod right here, Mystic Bond, which will give us 1 free ability cast for our Warframes every 5 companion abilities. So, however, do be warned, using this for energy economy can be bad for your survivability, as a lot of builds rely on energy to shield conversion for survivability, and if you aren't using any energy on your shield cast, this also means not having any shield regen on ability casts. But because Manifold Bond makes you basically spam Arc Coil, you get almost constant uptime with Mystic Bond, making it so you don't have to use any energy at all on your builds. Besides that, the build is basically exactly the same. Dethcube has a prime and comes with the Death Machine Gun or the Primed or Death Machine Gun Prime. It has a preset mod that will drop an energy orb on every 10 kill assists. This works very well with Duplex Bond and Synth Deconstruct for orb generation, which obviously works very well with Equilibrium. Even without Equilibrium, you'll still be getting the energy orb generation from Dethcube's Precept and also Duplex Bond. Duplex Bond will make up to 3 clones of the companion each time you use 100 energy. And while these clones will not use preset mods, they will attack enemies with the companion's weapon, and each time they kill an enemy, that enemy has a 50% chance to drop energy orbs. We obviously pair this with Verglass, as is the best DPS weapon, to give us a lot of energy orb generation. You can, of course, use Synth Deconstruct, especially with Tactical and Equilibrium, on any companion for energy economy plus additional utility that companion gives. And you can, of course, use Duplex Spawn and Verglass on any companion for a lot of energy orb generation and any extra utility that companion gives. But the extra preset mod that Dethcube has gives us stupid amounts of energy orb generation, which is really only good when you're using extremely energy hungry Warframes, as it isn't needed for most Warframes and is better off using other companions instead. But Dethcube is definitely still good enough to be mentioned and have a build for. So the Dethcube build is as follows. Obviously, we have Energy Generator up right in front. Then we have Duplex Bond, Contagion Bond for the normal Contagion Bond, which will further increase the DPS this weapon will do, as it will make it so whenever the companion kills an enemy, 50% of those status effects will be spread to additional enemies, which is fantastic. Synth Deconstruct, obviously. Guardian, obviously. Regen, Vital, Redirection for the companion's survivability. Vacuum must-have, and Assault Mode, obviously, to make the setup work. And lastly, we have Nautilus, which also has a prime, and it comes with Verglass or Verglass Prime, as I already mentioned. It has a preset mod that allows it to repair railjacks. This is useless, as you can just have an engineer crewmate. But it has another preset mod which will group enemies within 30 meters every 15 seconds, and of course the cooldown does get lowered by Manifold Bond. This gives you a companion that groups enemies for you, which is obviously very useful. I hope I don't need to explain how a grouping companion can be very useful. So you want to use Nautilus anytime you need a companion that will group enemies. The build is as follows. Obviously, we have Guardian again with Manifold Bond, Momentum Bond for the extra recovery. We have our survivability with Redirection and Enhanced Vitality, and then we have Cordon, which is the preset mod that groups enemies. Primed Regen for the decreased respawn timer, synth deconstruct obviously, and assault mode and vacuum are obviously must-haves. And we do use Taziko for the priming for manifold bond and also our weapons, Guncio, and condition overload effects. So that is all the Sentinels. Now moving on to the next robotic enemy, which is Hounds. Hounds are modular companions. They're essentially robotic dogs. They use all companion and robotic mods, even the companion mods that Sentinels cannot use. And as modular companions, they are broken up into 4 different parts, being modules, cores, brackets, and stabilizers. The parts determine the base stats of the companion and also additional faction and determine the base stats of the companion. Additionally, Hounds have 3 different types of preset mods they have. They have the audit mods, denial mods, and perspectus mods. They can only mod on one of each of these types on each Hound. The modules is the part of the Hound that gives you mastery, and it also gives you audit precepts and also the weapon. Hounds use their own specific melee weapons that other robotic companions cannot use, and Hounds also cannot use normal Sentinel weapons either. Brackets will come with a specific denial precept. Stabilizers will come with a specific perspectus precept and also an additional mod polarity for the companion. Although the different parts give specific precepts and specific weapons, depending on which part of the Hound it is, you can use any of the Hound's weapons and any of the Hound's precept on any Hound, regardless of what parts they are built with. Before you can gain mastery from Hounds, you must first level them up fully and then guild them by going to legs and using your Solaris United standing. Upon guilding them, their level will be reset. You'll be able to name the Hound and you'll also be able to put in an extra polarity on the Hound, basically like Forming it. Fully built Hounds are gotten from beating Sisters of Parvus alongside the weapon you get. So you need to vanquish them. You won't get it if you convert them. At least I don't think so. You only get it if you vanquish them. It will also give you 1 blueprint for one of the Hound components, and you can then build the Hound components and then go to legs to build your own Hound. But I would recommend just simply using whatever Hound you get from your sisters because it doesn't really matter what the different components are. The precepts are as follows. Null Audit, which will steal an aura from an Eximus for 60 seconds. This means the abilities that the Eximus have, so like the Flame ability, the Big Bubble, that's like Volt's Ice Globe, the Jade Eximus, any of the Eximus units, it'll be able to use that ability and it will steal that aura and ability for 60 seconds, while also stripping the Eximus's Overguard by 50%. Repo Audit, which is essentially Loki's 4th ability, it will disarm all enemies within 30 meters for 20 seconds. Equilibrium Audit, which will send out multiple pulse waves, knocking down enemies within 15 meters with a 30-second cooldown. Reflex Denial, which will make a shield that redirects up to 90% of enemy damage back at them for over 10 seconds with a 10-second cooldown. Diversified Denial, which will despawn the Hound but be replaced by 3 small inspectors of the Hound that deal 85% of the Hound's damage for 30 seconds and has a 50% cooldown. If all the Hound inspectors are killed, it will respawn the original Hound with 30% health, and the Hound cannot activate other preset mods while in this state. Evasion Denial, which will have the Hound teleport away from enemies and gain a 75% dodge chance for 8 seconds with a 50% second cooldown. Focused Perspectus, which will fire a beam at an enemy dealing heat damage and heat status and pushes them away with a 50-second cooldown. Synthesized Perspective, which fires out sparks at the nearest enemy within 30 meters, applying electric damage and status within 10 meters with a 10-meter AoE, and the sparks will ricochet up to 7 times, hitting additional enemies with a 10-second cooldown. And lastly, Aerial Perspectus, which will fire down a big beam, kind of like one of Valben's abilities, which does a bit of damage. Our Hounds are amazing when it comes to CC, especially when it comes to Synthesized Perspectives and also Repair Audit for the disarm and the mass electric stun. And they're also very good for priming with Manifold Bond as well. For the Hound build, I am using Guardian for that extra bit of survivability. Repo Audit, Manifold Bond for the disarm, the Manifold Bond, which will reduce the cooldown on all of the precepts. Then Deconstruct for the extra health orb generation, obviously. Synthesized Perspective, Reflex Denial for the survivability of the companion. You can also use Evasion Denial if you want. Just don't use Diversified Denial, as it'll stop it from being able to use its other precepts. Linked Redirection, Linked Vital for the additional survivability, along with Momentum Respond for the same reason. And of course, Vacuum as a must-have. For the Hound weapon, you can mod it to do some pretty good damage, but I haven't. I've simply just modded it to do different types of elements for Manifold Bond priming, and we simply just have viral heat and radiation. Lastly, we have Moas, which are another modular companion that can take all companion and robotic mods, including the ones that Sentinels cannot use. Moas The companion stats are based on which parts are used to build the Moa, and the different parts of them. The different parts are the models, cores, gyro, and brackets. The model is the part that gives the mastery for the Moas, and also 2 specific preset mods. Just like Hounds, while the Moas gain specific preset mods depending on which parts you use to build them, any of the Moa's preset mods can be used on any Moa. However, Moas can only equip up to 2 preset mods at a time of their unique preset mods at a time. Moas also use Sentinel weapons. They don't have unique weapons like Hounds. They use all the same weapons as Sentinels do. So if you want a build for Moa weapons, just go back to my Tactico and my Vergas build. Just like Hounds, they also must be gilded in the exact before you gain mastery from them, and you gild them in the exact same way you gild Hounds. So go back to that if you don't know how to do this. The different Moa component blueprints are bought from legs at Fortuna, and then you have to go build them in your foundry, and then return with the different components built to legs, who will then build the companion for you. The preset mods are Whiplash Mine, which will throw out a tether that will tether enemies within 20 meters, and after 1.5 seconds, pull them in together. The preset mod itself actually does say 3 seconds, but it's more like 1.5 seconds, not 3 seconds. Anti-grav grenade, which will suspend enemies up into the air in 6 meters, and then after 6 seconds, they will fall back to the ground and receive 80% of the damage dealt they received in the air as impact damage with a 20-second cooldown. Stasis field, which will now create a field within 10 meters. It used to be 5 meters. It's now 10 meters. Enemies that enter this, bullets that enter this field will have their speed slowed by 90%, and they will deal 60% less damage. It will also now reduce the damage that hit scan weapons do. Previously it did not. It lasts for 30 seconds and has a 20-second cooldown. The cooldown starts when the field ends. Shockwave or K-Tors, which simply just knocks down enemies within 12 meters every 10 seconds. Tractor Beam, which will give your Warframe 100% aim glide duration and 50% less gravity while aim gliding. Security Overdrive, which will auto-hack a console every 2 seconds and has a 30% chance on successful hacks to hack into a enemy robotic, which will then be forced to fight on your side. Blast Shield, which will increase the Moa's overshields by 3,000, and then leap at enemies within 10 meters, knocking them down, or enemies within 5 meters, after which it will then reset its shields and overshields. And then lastly, Hard Engage, which will simply make the Moa use a melee weapon, but instead it will still scale off the weapon mods on the normal Sentinel weapons. Overall, Moas don't honestly offer any interesting utility. None of the mods here are really that interesting. Stasis Field is the one that is the most interesting, but it's still not great as it is only in one specific location, and so you either have to stay in that location, which you probably don't want to do because it's Warframe, and you'll probably like to move around a lot. There's a negative to every single one of its preset mods, or the preset mod is just straight up useless to begin with, so Moas really aren't that amazing, even still after the rework, so I do not have a build for them. Anyway, I know that was a lot of information to cover. How long is this going for? Okay, 45 minutes. It was probably less after I edited it. But I know that was a lot of information to cover. It would have been even longer if I continued and go into the Beast Companions at the same time. So I will be releasing another video, hopefully very soon, about the Beast Companions, which received more updates in this the recent update. So there's probably more to talk about there in terms of what's new with them. Until then, please leave us a like and subscribe to my video if you enjoyed this video, and check out some of our other content. And until next time, bye-bye!